variety of solutions. The second is attend various courses, whether it's online or offline. There are countless courses you can participate in without spending a dime on it. There are great opportunities to connect with clever and like-minded people and learn from them. Number three is they actively seek opportunities to grow. Instead of spending your free time laying on the couch and watching TV, you prefer to do something creative and practical. Number four, they take care of their bodies. A clever mind combined with a body in great condition is the best asset you can have. Our bodies were designed to run, walk, swim, jump, lift, and much more. Leading a sedentary life harms you both physically and mentally. They have diverse passions. Having a variety of passions indicate you love to progress. By practicing different skills, you give yourselves an advantage over the rest of the people. During hard times, you are more likely to act intelligently and solve your problems with less effort. Number six, they love making progress. Having a deep desire to grow, your chances of success are way higher compared to when you are forced to learn. You always want constant growth and improvement. They challenge themselves with specific goals. In order to keep growing, you clearly define your goals. Smart goal setting is one of the tools to ensure constant growth. Number eight, they embrace change. A complete change can lead to incredible results. Change can lead to extraordinary results, so you welcome it and stay open-minded about making a shift. They believe it's never too late to start learning something. To learn and improve is for its own sake. You are never too old. Number 10, the attitude to get better is contagious. As Gandhi would say, you need to be the change you want to see in the world. Number 11, they leave their comfort zone. Every time you get out of your comfort zone, regardless whether you win or fail, you learn something new. And number 12, they never settle down. A sense of being clever enough is something you don't experience. Without a doubt, you appreciate what you already know, but that's never a reason to stop. You just know once you stop learning, you lose the amazing privilege humans have, namely the ability to never-ending intellectual development. And I just thought, I just have the opportunity to just keep on learning, and you just never stop. You just continue, and you find different ways to learn. And I just thought that was kind of good. And I'll just say a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful at this time to meet as a planning commission to help this city to improve and do what is right by the people, and bless that we'll have the citizens in mind to improve in what we need to do. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. I think we're always learning as planning commissioners, and hopefully we're doing better and better the more and more we learn. So before we turn to our first item of commission business, we noticed that we have a new face here. So I'd like to formally welcome our newest planning commissioner, Heidi Chagrud. And before we get started, I have asked her to take a minute and just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background. So I will turn the time over to her, but I'd like to extend our welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Yep, I'm Heidi Chagrud, and I've actually lived in Centerville for most of my life. I remember when I was 14, I went and spoke to the city council and had some comment to make on some development. It started my path down to something fun, I guess. I have a master's degree in landscape architecture and a master's degree in urban and regional planning. And I work full-time as a landscape architect. I have a great husband who's a nurse and two wonderful daughters who are full of life and energy. And I'm just excited to be here. As you might guess, since I'm a landscape architect, I do really enjoy the outdoors, and I think Centerville is a great place, cushioned between the Great Salt Lake and the mountains, and I love Centerville, so I'm excited to be here. Hopefully I can be a benefit.
We're delighted to have you. So welcome to the Centerville City Planning Commission. Okay. Starting with our first item of commission business, we have the Hive development and preliminary subdivision. This is before us for an administrative decision. So I will turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Heyman and members of the commission. So first of all, let me share my screen just a
And
moment.
Mackenzie, before you get started, I apologize for interrupting you. I understand that Commissioner Chagrud has a recusal on this one. So Commissioner Chagrud, if you could just confirm that and state for the record why you're recusing, and then we'll just ask you to step down, which normally we would send you out into the audience, but since we don't have that ability, we'll just ask you to turn off your video and not participate for this matter. So go ahead, I'll turn the time over to you.
Yes, as soon as I am introduced and welcomed, I get to recuse myself immediately. Seems kind of silly, but I do live adjacent to this development, and so I would like to recuse myself from this issue, and we'll do that now.
That is
Thank you.
noted, and you are excused, and we will call you back once we get done with this. Okay, and now with that, I apologize, Mackenzie. I will now officially turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm working on sharing my screen. Okay. Can you see my whole document, not just a portion? Okay, perfect. Tonight is the preliminary subdivision application for.
I can only see a portion. I can't see the whole thing.
You can only see a
I can
portion.
see, like, the first 2 paragraphs, but it's enough for now.
Okay. Okay. Right. There's many pages, so I'll scroll through it. So this is preliminary subdivision for the property located at 555 North, 400 West, the current location of Centerville Mobile Estates. We've seen it several times before, but this is the next step in the process. Just to get you all on board with where we're at now, the City Council approved their rezone, which split the project into 2 separate sections. The west side is commercial high, the east side is residential high, and it all falls under a PDO. So we'll go into things to pull out from this application. So these are items that were listed in the last application review to be provided with this one. So this first item, stormwater management and drainage, the applicant and our city engineer told me that they recently started their groundwater study, so they do not have the full study done yet. It takes about a month, so we have about a month before we will know what the groundwater level is for this project, which will determine detention versus retention, which doesn't hugely change the broad strokes of the subdivision plan, but it'll change a lot of the minutia. So there's that first item. And then the second item, Corey and I talked about quite a lot. So the general landscaping requirements say 1 tree per 500 square feet. And then PDOs are way down at the bottom of the code saying, oh, PDOs are different, residential PDOs are really different. So I've updated this, my at least copy of the staff report. They have the required amount of trees. So the PDO section of the landscaping code negates this 1 tree per 500 square feet. It doesn't for the commercial section, which they meet it for the commercial section. They don't need 1 tree per 500 square feet in the residential section. So they do not need almost 200 trees, which is good because I'm not sure where they would all go. Continuing down the line, they have 8 trees shown along their frontage, along the frontage road, which they're required to have 12 trees in the commercial zone. 11 of those need to be on the frontage just because they have so much frontage, which probably means that if we look farther down in the parking lot interior, that they will need more trees than just the required 12 so that they can meet the frontage requirements, the parking lot requirements as well, which will probably total more than just that 1 tree per 500 square feet. So as it is right now, that first item, this should be a yes. I'll change it now. They have 1 tree per 500 square feet. They need to add more trees to the frontage road. And then the landscaping plan wasn't clear enough to say yes for all of these items. It looks like they have 50% of building frontage. It looks like they have 7% of parking area in landscaping, but it's unclear. But it does appear that they do not have enough trees or shrubs within their parking lot requirement. And then there's a note that I made in the staff report. Corey previously said they don't need a landscape architect because the commercial site is less than 1 acre, but because it's now under a broad strokes PDO rezone, it is greater than 1 acre. And so we decided that they should have a landscape architect create the plan, and that should take care of all of these issues right here. They have a licensed architect with their civil plans. They provided utility screening. They provided sidewalk along the frontage road, but it does not appear that they connected their internal sidewalk to the frontage road sidewalk. So then I just have these few comments here. I talked with our drainage specialist and our city engineer. And while we're waiting for that groundwater study to determine just what technical aspects of drainage are required, they did make a comment that in the plan, let me see if I can pull up that. Let's see if I've got it handy. Okay. Okay. So this is just their broad strokes landscaping plan. But if you see this gap here between the commercial building and the townhomes, this area here is dedicated as their detention or retention basin, but it is also part of their common space. And so the drainage specialist, city engineer, commented that that's probably not a great idea if they intend to have it as an open space where children might be, because whether or not they do detention or retention, there will be water there pretty much whenever it rains. It might not be a lake, but it will get fairly soggy there. And so they don't recommend that, but there's not particularly anything against that in the code. And then I'm gonna share my screen again, back to the staff report. And the city engineer sent out, oh goodness, sharing screens, not very fun. Let's try this again. Okay, so the city engineer sent out an email just yesterday with these 14 items, which some of them have been addressed in my staff report. Most of them are highly technical. So oil separator, most of these can be addressed in the final subdivision, and so I don't think they should stall the project as it is. But one thing noted in the staff report is easements. There aren't currently any easements located or provided in the civil drawings. And then this number 13, tie sidewalk system into the sidewalks along the frontage road on both sides of the entrance. So currently they show sidewalks that go from 400 West into the project and up to the commercial building. And then it goes south and connects to that pedestrian pathway that's just behind Centerpoint Theater and behind Chick-fil-A. But to meet city specs, they'll need to tie that sidewalk in to the road, not just to that pedestrian path. So most of these things, highly technical, not my area of expertise, but that should be provided in the final site plan. And so I've updated my staff report recommendations. I'll show that here. So these edits in red, to take out that requirement for 198 trees, but also to add that email list required by the city engineer. And I know, so those are my comments. If you have questions, let me know. But I also know that Jeff Allen, who is representing this project, is also here on the call.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a really quick question. So just a quick reminder, Mackenzie, when we're calculating frontage trees, for example, trees and shrubs count, right? So on the diagram, there's like on the frontage road, 4 trees and 7 shrubs. That's how we get to the 11, right? Is that what we're doing there?
So I did, yeah, so they need 11. And on frontage trees, so it's kind of tricky. You can replace a tree with 10 shrubs. So there's not enough along the frontage road at the moment. And you can only replace 25% of the trees that are required with shrubs.
Okay, is there a similar, so that's on the frontage, and is that because it's commercial on the frontage road side? Is there a similar requirement over on Fourth West on the residential side?
It's a little hazy. So yeah, so that's a little hazy. Again, Corey just popped up, so I'm sure he has an opinion.
Corey's got something to say.
But the PDO, yeah, so for the PDO, it's super specific about high residential. 1 tree per unit, 2 shrubs per unit. So they meet that. It doesn't say where they need to be, so they could relocate those, but let's get Corey's opinion on the frontage.
The answer is they're separate issues. The landscaping section of the zoning ordinance will address commercial and industrial projects. Then there's a subsection that addresses non-single family projects. And so this one falls under the non-single family because of the RH zone zoning. And then the PDO adds the single family in as part of that custom approval. So when you deal with a residential component, they don't go back to internal parking lot shrubs and trees. It doesn't address street trees. What it addresses in there is they have to provide non-residential projects. They have to provide 40% open space. 50% of it needs to be in common. 50% can be in private. You can reduce the 40% to 30% if they request, which they're not requesting in this case. And then they provide tree for each dwelling unit as a part of that overall landscape area. So there's no specific planting parameters and locations.
Okay, thanks, Corey.
I just had a couple quick questions. First, Mackenzie, are the easements required as part of this preliminary approval or not?
So they are required.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the short answer. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
preliminary
thank you.
subdivision approvals to show essentially where the easements would go. What we anticipate on the easements is, since this is being common area and a public road, is we'll likely have a blanket public utility over most of the project.
So how do we satisfy that requirement if we're going to, if there's, I see there's a narrative for an approval. I don't know if I saw that as one of the conditions. Was that one of the conditions, is the easements or not?
Let me switch back to it to see if it was in there. Yes, so it's in item 7. Let me see if I can share that back with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, item 7, final shall provide all public utility easements as required by city code.
So the way we're requiring it on the preliminary is requiring it as a condition of our approval.
That's how I drafted it. You don't have to, because it is a requirement of preliminary and they didn't provide it. I drafted a approval, but you do not have to go with what I drafted.
Okay. Just for commissioners, I don't really care. I from an easement perspective, it's much more simple from a development and a engineering perspective to do easements closer when you're really closer to final as opposed to preliminary. So I don't have an issue with that personally. I just wanted to make sure I understood our ordinance. The second question I've got is on the sidewalk that fronts the frontage road, the way I see it, and maybe I'm not seeing it quite right on the current plan, is that there is not a park strip, or is there even a sidewalk? That's the issue I think that you're bringing up, Mackenzie. I think I see a sidewalk that doesn't have a park strip, but maybe I'm seeing it completely wrong and there's not even a sidewalk.
So that's how I read it too. They have the existing sidewalk has no park strip. And it's really only for that section of the street that there is no park strip. Once you get back to Chick-fil-A, there's a park strip. Once you get back into the single family residential, there's a park strip. But that's how the existing sidewalk already is. And it doesn't look like they intend to edit that.
Yeah, I think we'd weigh in on Kevin. I think city specification is a 4-foot park strip and a 4-foot sidewalk or minimum city specs.
And I'd be interested just to hear what my fellow commissioners, how they feel about it. I'm not terribly enthused about it. I think park strips are important visually and for safety purposes. But anyways, that was my question. So that's all I've got right now.
Mackenzie, can I ask a clarification with regard to your proposed revised language on the motion? If you'll
Sure.
put the language back up.
Yep, just a moment. If I can find it again. I must have, okay. All right, technical difficulties. Just a moment.
I mean, I can just ask you, because I think you had stricken, oh, there we go. So in number 6 there, you've stricken a landscape plan. I'm assuming that was not intended to be stricken. So your proposed language would read, a final subdivision submittal shall provide a landscape plan signed by and bear the blah, 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 right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I assumed as much. I just wanted to confirm. Any other questions for staff? If not, we'll go ahead and invite the applicant to join us. So applicant, if you'd like to, there we are. Mr. Allen, if you'll just introduce yourself for us.
Hi, my name's Jeff Allen. I'm with CW Urban. I'm the Director of Land and running the project, the Hive.
Great. Would you like to tell us anything or respond to any of the issues that you've heard or statements by staff or staff report?
Yeah, sure. Mackenzie, I appreciate all your hard work. Thanks for the great introduction. As far as addressing the issues, we did receive the comments from Kevin, the city's engineer, and we've actually worked through most of those. So we appreciate his feedback. Loci is our landscape architect that we'll be using on this project. So we will work with them to continue to address some of those issues with trees. Other than that, we can also look at the park strip on the frontage road. So it's in compliance with the existing sidewalk to the north and to the south.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate you, Mr. Allen, and you're welcome to close down your video. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we will take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter. So it doesn't look to me like we have anybody on deck in the Zoom meeting room, but we'll give it a few moments if anyone wants to call us in via telephone. I know that that can take some time before it gets through. And seeing no one join us via telephone, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff? Any further discussion or debate?
I just have been really pleased with this process. It came on a place that was obviously difficult for a lot of residents, and the decision was heartbreaking for so many people. But despite that, I'm grateful for the efforts that the residents gave to have their voices be heard. I'm grateful for CW Urban's handling of that and handling of their concerns. And I've heard from some residents of the trailer park who have appreciated how CW Urban has handled things. And it seems like we've gone back and forth with some of these things. And just hearing from Jeff right there, it was helpful to see that they're already taking steps to address the things that have been listed by the city staff. And Spencer brought up the sidewalk and park strip, which were concerns of mine, and the fact that Jeff just stated that they're going to make sure that they're in compliance with that also makes me feel better. So overall, this has been a tough process, but like a heart-wrenching process, but I think we've come to a place where I feel really comfortable with what has come about, and I feel like I could approve this.
Thanks, Becky. I'm sort of with Spencer. I don't know, maybe I'm with Spencer, maybe I'm not with you, depending on how you feel about the park strip, but I am always one for consistency. And if the surrounding properties have a park strip with a sidewalk, my preference would always be to have the properties be consistent. How does everyone else feel about the park strip?
Well, and that's a requirement of our code. So I think that's what I was saying, that he's gonna follow that, so.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I've got just kind of one little comment. And, you know, it's kind of too bad that Mason's not here. I don't want to put words in Mason's mouth, but we've heard him in the past talk about projects that don't seem to be fully complete, or proposals don't seem to be fully complete. And to me, the only thing on this one is there does feel like a lot that's not there. You know, we do preliminary subdivision plans or preliminary or conceptual site plans on a regular basis that have things here and there, but it does feel like there's a lot of to do still left on this one. It just kind of gives me a moment of pause, you know. So that's the only comment I have.
If I could just step in, Chair Heyman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I see your point. This is part of really a preliminary subdivision is just to look at how you're dividing the lots. And this is 2 lots. And it's a requirement to go through the step to show on a preliminary plan how you're going to divide the 2 lots. I think the landscaping trees, the landscaping architect, some of those details, I think are more fit for final site plan. See, they still have a final site plan process to go through, and they still have a final subdivision process to go through. So the only thing that I see really that you could match your concerns would be is addressing the stormwater management. And you have to decide how comfortable you are with how they're handling the stormwater management. I think they've addressed the majority of all the other items. Their preliminary utilities and to the lots are all pretty much in place. What you're seeing Kevin's list is really doing is that's really a final subdivision list. He's just jumping ahead with the engineer for their final subdivision drawings and making sure they understand what needs to be on those final subdivision drawings. The largest issue that I see at the preliminary that would be of concern is the whole discussion of the open space versus the detention area that Mackenzie brought up as a suggestion from our drainage utility. Under our code, we like to share that. If you look strictly at the zoning code, sharing detention facilities and recreational areas is encouraged. I think where I'm perceiving their concern is arriving at this point to resolve is that we planned for that open space to be in common for the area. But you've seen us recently a state code change where instead of just the detention, which is to capture the rainwater and distribute it out in a metered fashion during a storm, state codes are now looking at retention. Retention is where they keep it on site and then it filters down into the soils on its own accord rather than a metered discharge. And I think the concern that is yet to be answered for this preliminary subdivision, and something that I think needs to either be made sure we address it in the conditions of approval or receive a comfort level at the commission level, is that we don't know where the groundwater is. If the groundwater is very shallow, then there are exemptions to go to the metered flow of the detention. If it can percolate, then they'll require to retain that water. And I think that's where you're hearing this idea is if they're retaining water, there could be water in there a number of times above and beyond just a day of a storm. And because I know that the applicant has already gone forward and put some monitoring tubes into the ground, if I recall correctly, discussing that with Kevin, and they're just going to monitor that for a little bit and see how that groundwater acts and determine its depth. And then we'll decide whether we're retaining or retaining on that site. And I think that's a complex issue that we usually try to have a better understanding at preliminary, but we just don't know at this point. But because we have a final site plan, because we have a final subdivision plan, it felt comfortable to staff to just let Kevin and the applicant work out those engineering details. And hopefully that makes sense to you.
From a practical standpoint, I found myself thinking if there's going to be a big collection of water there from a planning practical perspective, I can't imagine that the applicant is going to put, playground equipment there. It would be a muddy disaster. So maybe I worried about it a little less from a practical standpoint. I do see that our applicant, it looks like, wishes to speak. Does anyone have any objection if we invite our applicant back to address this one? Seeing shaking heads, we'll invite our applicant, Mr. Allen. You're welcome to add to or to address this issue.
Great, thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, we have performed soils tests with CMT, our engineer, and we didn't find any groundwater, and that was a concern of the city engineer. Historically, there's been water in the area, and so that's why we went back and installed these monitoring tubes so that we could monitor it for a period of time to either confirm our original soils report of actually a non-existing water table in the area or one that we didn't reach in some areas. So that's why we kind of planned for some of that retention as our open space. We did keep a portion of it dry where the pickleball courts will be so that it's still usable. I just wanted to point that out as you guys discuss this further.
Thank you very much for that. Any further discussion on this one?
I know that our ordinance does encourage that, and I think that's meant for flexibility for the applicant and the developer. I personally, I used to live right in that area, and the water table in my house and my neighborhood was quite high. And I personally don't think that putting any kind of playground equipment would be a good idea. So like you, Shaylin, I was glad there was nothing there. It would be nice if there could be a solution. If there is an issue with that engineering, there could be a solution that still would allow residents to utilize that space as best as possible. Creative engineering, I'm sure you can come up with something. I'm not going to sit here and micromanage that, but I feel comfortable with what I can see right now, that it's not going to be like we're putting all of our stuff here and then we're also going to retain and everything. So I'm similar to what you were thinking, Shaylin.
Any further discussion? If not, since I've written it down, I will make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the preliminary subdivision plan for the Hive subdivision with directives 1 through 7 of the staff report, but revising number 6 to read, a final subdivision submittal shall provide a landscape plan signed by and bear the seal of a Utah licensed landscape architect licensed under the Landscape Architects Licensing Act as set forth in Utah Code 5853-101, and add number 8, which is address items listed in city engineer email dated December 8th of 2020 for suggested reasons A through C. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Commissioner Summerhays, the second, moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll start with you, Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox?
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays?
Aye.
Commissioner Daly?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. We will invite Commissioner Chagrud to rejoin us.
Heidi, can you help us understand how to say your last name?
Am I saying it wrong? I slaughter Mason's name every.
It's
hearing.
okay. I want to make sure that I'm saying it right too.
Yeah, I say Chagrud,
Chagrud.
but I have cousins that live in a different part of the country and they say Chagrud. So I'm good with whatever you say.
My first name is Shaylin, so I answered a hey you. So
Exactly.
I'm with you. Okay. Next item on our agenda, this is Legacy Crossing Lots 2 and 3, a PDO amendment and conceptual site plan. I understand that the applicant may have requested to table this matter until January 13th. I'll invite staff. Have we received that formal word? Do we have the applicant here?
You don't have the applicant here. I did receive an email yesterday requesting that it be tabled. So I do have documentation of that request. And so I amended your online agenda to put that note in there.
Great. Based on that, I'll move to table this, to table that matter until our next Planning Commission meeting on June 13th.
January.
Yeah, I keep saying it wrong. Maybe I just really want it to be summer till January 13th. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do I have anyone that is opposed to that? No, if not, okay. Moving on to our next item on the agenda. This is a final site plan for Dave's Complete Auto. This is an administrative decision. Before I turn the time over to staff, I will note that I understand that an attorney at my firm is representing the owner of this piece of property. And even though I'm not involved in that at all, out of an abundance of caution, I will go ahead and recuse from this matter. So I will turn the administration of this over to Vice Chair Daly, and I will proverbially step down.
Thanks, Shaylin. We got Recusal Fest 2020 going on today, so lots of fun. Anyway, yeah, so Shaylin's already introduced the topic, and we'll turn the time over to staff to give us the rundown, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so hopefully you should see on your screen the conceptual submittal. This comes from the building elevation landscaping section or attachments of your agenda. So kind of take the commission back a little bit in time. You've probably seen variations of Mr. Bell and his applications through time. Your last one you probably saw was a rezone, and that did go up to the city council, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective of things, that did not pass enough muster for the city council to accept the rezone. So what you're seeing is a plan nearly a year ago. If you recall, Mr. Bell came in with an expansion opportunity for his lot. The Planning Commission received or gave conceptual plan acceptance to that plan, and Mr. Bell is now resurrecting that approval. He has a year time frame to come forward with the final, so he is going to bring that back before it expires for the commission's review under a final site plan. So just to recap, for those of you who weren't in attendance, or those of you who have conveniently allowed all of your 11 other agendas in time occupy your brain space. This was an expansion area originally. So if you look at the east side, you see where you have Marley Dillon Bell property. A long time ago, that property was split, and the back half was assimilated into Mr. Bell's property. And so he'd like to expand his building using that property from many moons ago. Just to recap, the conceptual plan contained some approvals that needed to be taking place as part of it, some further discussions to take place before he came back to final site plan. One of those discussion items was the building setback. If you look at the addition on the north side, that does not comply with current city setback standards. And so a condition of that conceptual approval was to either go to the Board of Adjustment or adjust the building to meet the setback. Mr. Bell did make application to the Board of Adjustment for variance, and the Board of Adjustment did grant a variance to allow the building to match the addition to match the existing setback of the facility. And then they subsequently conditioned that the final site plan, landscaping and parking and so forth be determined by the Planning Commission. Why that's important in their conditions of approval is that expanding a non-conforming building without the required parking count is not allowed under the Board of Adjustment's purview. In order to grant an expansion of a non-conforming building, which in case they did, the site must comply with the parking parameters of the city code. That introduces the long ago discussion about a parking modification. And so the Board of Adjustment is basically turning over the final determination on parking to the Planning Commission, because they were advised that the applicant during the conceptual was seeking a parking modification. If you recall, the parking modification on this size, or the standard parking on this size of facility was just barely over 80 stalls. I think it was 83 stalls would be the parking count. If you recall, the applicant submitted a parking request under using existing counts and user behavior, historical patterns to the facility. And that study that was submitted during conceptual review indicated approximately they only needed 23 or so stalls and as a historical use. The Planning Commission debated that to some degree during conceptual, looked at as I recall, the existing counts of the facility. And there was a preliminary aerial view that said that we were probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 or so stalls on the site. And so the Planning Commission in the layout delayed the decision on the parking modification to come back for final. And part of that delay involved the existing counts that were feasible on the site, even if the addition has taken place. But you also reviewed a city engineer. The city engineer did a parking study, and they recommended up to 35 stalls for the facility. And so you have the applicant looking at a historical count of 23 or 25. You look at our city engineer's firm, said they probably ought to be anywhere from 25 to 35. And then you had the Planning Commission discussion that there were nearly 40 stalls existing. So you delayed the parking modification discussion till final to look at the ultimate capacity with the addition. What you're seeing on the site plan regarding parking is, I believe, 44 stalls. So we're in the neighborhood of what that aerial discussion a year ago entailed. What I see with the 44 stalls is there's not clarity on the application on how we're going to handle the required internal parking lot landscaping. Commercial properties are required to have, I think, 7%. There's a tabulation 5 or 7% internal parking. How that's calculated is for every 6 required parking stalls, you're required to have 1 tree and 2 shrubs and a minimum of 25 square feet of landscaping for that vegetation set. You can aggregate that throughout a parking. You don't have to have it for every 6 stalls. You just use the count of every 6, and then you aggregate it into certain areas. And there's a prioritization list of those areas that you can aggregate to. One example is you see this entrance coming in on the southern end of the property. You do see a small island that they're proposing in the parking. And so that would be a priority that you could count for internal parking lot landscaping. Another one is this island along this front bank of stalls. That would qualify as internal parking lot landscaping for the sake of the code. And so there is some site planning going on, meeting some of those priorities for internal parking lot landscaping, but we don't have a final count. We don't know if for every 6 stalls, so that's pending whatever the commission decides the required parking is. For every 6 stalls that you require, we'll have to go back in and calculate what that internal parking landscaping should be. And so in my recommendation to you, I'm not saying let's approve it at 44 stalls, because we may have to extract a few stalls in order to meet the internal parking lots landscaping. So my recommendation is basing it on the 35 stalls from the city engineer. And so I think that's a decision you have to make is, are you comfortable with 23 stalls? You comfortable with 35? Do you want the 44? And if you want the 44, the applicant will have to go and readjust for this internal parking lot landscaping. So I think that's probably the major issue of my staff report to you. The other issue for clarity, they came back to you a few meetings later, the applicant, for a waiver of this buffer landscaping. So if you look on this south and east sides, normally there's a 30-foot landscape buffer. The commission approved it at 15 feet. And so I'm just trying to make you aware that the 15 feet that was previously waived by the commission, the other half, 15 feet, is now installed with the required trees. And so other than that, some minor details in the staff report. I think the major issue that I would be seeking, and I'm sure the applicant would be seeking, is your feedback on what you think the parking requirement would be. And then I've conditioned, if you feel comfortable, allowing the applicant and staff to work out those final details. And if we can work them out, whatever your count is, then he can move forward. If there is somehow a dispute about it, then we would come back to you to resolve it. And so that would be my recommendation, to approve it subject to the conditions written.
Great. Thanks, Corey. So just for clarification, Corey, that 15 feet that you're talking about, the buffer, that does not count toward internal parking landscaping because it's the buffer? Is that why?
Correct. That is correct.
And it's same with the frontage. The frontage landscaping is frontage landscaping and can't be counted as internal parking landscaping.
That's an area that can be flex. The frontage landscaping is correct, is separate than internal parking lot landscaping. But the minimum frontage landscaping off an arterial street, I believe, is 15 feet of landscaping. So it would have to be in excess of that 15 feet to be counted towards the parking lot.
Gotcha. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Corey?
I've got one. So
Go ahead.
Corey, help me understand, if our ordinance requires 83, but our city engineer feels like 35 is fine, but maybe 44, like that's a huge wide gap. Help me understand how we have an ordinance that maybe seemingly requires excessive parking, or maybe that's the right parking and this is vastly underparked. Help me understand such wide discrepancies between all of these seemingly different reports.
Welcome to the great debate. You're on par of trying to figure out an answer to this question. One, to step back, way back to the 30,000 foot level, the commission has asked staff in your interim goals to go back and look at our parking ordinance, because this is not the first time that some of these discussion about numbers and disparities have taken place. So understand that's a future thing, and that may lead to some of these discussions that we've had in the past, but that won't be a part of this project. We'll narrow it down to the 10,000 and the 5,000 foot altitude for this project site. Our parking ordinance is basically built on a square footage, 5 per thousand for office, 4 per thousand for retail. And I would say in our parking ordinance, there's a predominant 4 per thousand. So whether you're looking at retail or you're looking at auto or you're looking at a lot of uses, this 4 per thousand is very common to a lot of our uses. Incorrectly or correctly, debate at another time. What I see is that Mr. Bell is looking at his specific use and saying, I've never had a demand of 4 per 1,000 for my business, because that's what this would be. To get to the 83 is 4 per 1,000 square feet of building area. And he feels he doesn't have a historical demand to that, as well as a client or patron demand to that. And what our parking ordinance does is we have a little section that says, in spite of our tables, you have the opportunity to come back for a modification. And you can look at the modification in, an example is a mixture of commercial uses, where you can look at shared parking. And so you don't always have to be independent on like a shopping center. You don't have to put 4 per 1,000 for every single building that's on the place, when you can show that there's off-peak demand and times and shared parking opportunities. You can do the shared parking where you don't have to put it all on one site, and you can share it among various sites. And so it allows us to prove it that way. Another example that's in the parking modification is a use that's not listed in our table. If we don't have it, like, I'm trying to think of, I won't make one off the top of my head because you never know where you're going to go. But if we have a use that is not listed in the parking table, we have a place that says, okay, a parking study now, you have to provide a parking study that shows us the number of uses. But we also have a last section that a user can say, hey, I think your parking doesn't reflect my use, so I want to modify it. And here are my supporting documents that modify it to my use. And I think that's what you have in a disparity, is Mr. Bell is looking at historical patron use for the prominent view as I read the parking study. And I don't want to discount that historic review. They probably only need 25 or so stalls from historical. But one of the concerns I think I raised early on is that Mr. Bell historically may change hands, and it may still be an auto repair. And they may have a different type of repair business than Mr. Bell has, and they may need additional parking. And so I was very hesitant during the conceptual to just accept a specific patron use. And so we, as part of that, had the city engineer look at the parking study, and they said, yeah, in auto repair, we can see this range, 25 to 35. And so I'm hanging, even though our city engineer even goes as low, nearly as low as the historic patron use, I'm looking at it for the long-term provision and saying, if our code requires 83 and our city engineer says, hey, it could be probably satisfied at 35, I'd rather go at 35 than 25. And that's all I'm really taking the position on. You as a commission, I mean, this is your role as a planning commission. If you think 83 is needed for now and the future, and we're overbuilding this site to create a on-street parking problem, then you could decide to stick with the 83 if you wanted to. I think it's your discretion. So that's why you have a disparity of opinions. Do you like Monet or do you not like Monet art? It's up to you.
So Corey, I guess along those lines, as long as this property, as long as the use remains as vehicle repair, we'd never see this again for any type of site plan. But if the use changes to some kind of warehousing or something, does that come back to us that doesn't come back to us for a site plan review, does it?
It depends on how you couch this modification. What is it for? And that's where I think if it's slated for vehicle repair, we're probably safe. But if this was converted at a later date to retail, it probably shouldn't continue on as a permanent modification.
I thought that all parking exceptions were based on use. Weren't they tied to the use, or is that just based on what we decide?
Generally, you've tied them to the use, but it's not specific in the code that you have to. It just says you can allow a parking modification.
Okay.
Kevin, you look like we're going to finish your thought. Then I had one question after you.
Well, no, I was just going to say that's honestly my biggest concern, is that the use significantly changes, and then that we go from something that requires 20 to 30 parking stalls to something that really should have 50 to 60 or something like that. So if we were to tie it to use, I think that would help to comfort my concerns.
Yeah. Corey, just one last question, and that is, how many stalls are existing on the site currently? I don't know if I saw that on the staff report.
I don't have that count. This site was expanded from its original place with that rear property, and that rear site never received an official site plan. So we're probably at an existing count of approved in the mid 20s. But what you saw at the Planning Commission is, as they expanded that site before they received the final site plan approval, there was additional parking occurring on there, and the aerial photo was roughly counting in the mid 40s.
And the reason I asked that is because if they're increasing the size of their facility by effectively 70%, which is the 8,500 square feet, should they not have some commensurate increase in their parking from where they're at right now? So where they're at right now, plus another 70% on top of what they've got. That's why I asked that question. I'm sure I could just, while we talk, I can go to Google Maps and do that quick count, but that's one of the reason I ask.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Spencer, or generally a good point, but except in this case, you know, where the use is, they're going to expand the building, and that additional space is going to be used, the vehicles are going inside, right? Like, you don't expand the building and put all the vehicles outside.
Maybe
Yeah, if you look at the conceptual site plan, they show you how many cars that could be in the building under repair at one time.
maybe
which
we can let
parts
the applicant
maybe?
talk about this, and then we can keep discussing this.
Sure, let's do that. Let's keep focused on any other questions for Corey about his staff report or any of those types of things. If not, then let's invite the applicant to step forward, I guess. You can turn on your video if you'd like, and introduce yourself, and you can discuss any of these items that we've been discussing, any of the items in the staff report, or anything else you'd like us to know.
Good evening, staff. I guess, Corey, if you'll bring up that, if you would please bring up that site plan again, so everybody can see it. Hope we don't have to stare at my face big. I guess the first thing, the parking, we'll talk about that. The historical numbers, I gave the city engineer, and we actually, I did, Intellis Engineering did our parking analysis, and I gave him 20 years worth of data about, you know, our parking load. And Kevin, you're right. That building is for cars, so the parking will be going in. There won't be any more parking. You know, I'm hoping to hire 2 more employees to fill, you know, to work in those bays that we're adding in the building. But my business, yeah, there's our car count. I'm back up there. Good for you, Corey, man. You're right on it. A little more, Corey. Yeah, those are from 1998 to 2019. You can see the sales amount, the car count. That'll all match. You know, if somebody wanted to get, you know, really like, is that true? You can match it with the sales tax revenue reported, you know, through the state. But as you can see, our car count is just historically, like, look at it lately, it's gone way down. And the reason for that is my auto repair is not your big O tire. You know, I've said this before, you don't want to come to me. I'm a divorce attorney. You know, I'm doing ugly, you know, big work here. We got just mechanics here. We don't have guys changing oil. So all this work comes inside, it sits for longer than I'd like it to, and then we do it, we get it done, and people, it's a lot of companies, if you'll see the kind of vehicles around here, it's a lot of work trucks, things like that. There you go. Those are basically, not basically, those are the bays that are allowed, you know, that I'm gonna have in this building. So I don't know how many's on there, but, oh, it looks like 93. The engineer's drawn 93. So I'll get past that. Hopefully, you know, the parking is not going to be an issue, and it has never been. So I think we'll be fine. This internal parking landscape definition, I guess what all that landscaping in the back, and I just want to reemphasize, it's going to be beautiful. It's on the inside of an impound yard with an 8-foot cement wall blocking view of the whole thing from the rest of the world, but we'll put it in there and keep it nice. And since that is an locked impound yard, I can't even think how much more that qualifies as exactly what internal parking landscape is. It's internal in a parking lot, and that's pretty good for internal parking space. So I'm kind of asking you in the nicest way possible, is there some way we could just say that's covered? Because I don't want to have to give up, you know, parking spaces, since you're concerned about it, for landscaping, when we've obviously got what I would say is a lot of internal landscaping for parking. I tried, I think some of you might be aware of the hurdles that I've tried with rezoning the property to the east of me there to gather more. I couldn't get anybody to see my way, so I'm back trying to get this done. And Spencer, or maybe it's Kevin, some of you guys were saying that, you know, I understand it's a concern and you need to keep it there, but there's no way on this earth, if this building, if for some reason Tesla really goes over the trillion mark in value or something, it just goes nuts, and all of a sudden in 10 years from now, because that's how long realistically, I'll give you a little business thing here in my head. But let's just say all of a sudden, man, heavy duty diesel engines, they figure out a way to move all this stuff on battery power, and I'm done. It'll take 10 years to eliminate, you know, what we got on the road that's worth repairing and things like that, is my guess. So if it started boom today, I'm done in 2030. My two sons, they could come into the screen here if they'd like, but this building is good. You know, if the worst case scenario that happens, and of course I think of that, worst case scenario that happens, I got 10 years on this. I think pretty good is my luck. And then this building would be ravaged, just like, you know, the steakhouse down the road. This 1.5 acres out here in the frontage road, there ain't nobody in their right mind ever going to do what I did out here in this building. They would razz this building because it's basically a warehouse. It's, you know, and then you guys, it'd be back in front of, not you all, but another council and another planning and zoning, and all this stuff would not be a whim or a whiff, I think. So I'm asking you please to see it, so I can get this building built, so I can keep going. And I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin, can I ask another question of Corey? You're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, do you have any, does it set up a question for the applicant? 'Cause let's ask the applicant some questions first if we have them.
It's a more of an ordinance question, and that is, does it matter in terms of our parking counts? You know, you just pulled up that plan, Corey. The stall count is showing stalls counted as covered within the facility. Do those count under ordinance, or does it not differentiate between the two?
The marked stall wouldn't it doesn't differentiate that you have to keep it open for patron or not patron use. You just have to provide a total number of stalls for your.
But not inside the building. That doesn't count.
Right, inside the building does not count under our ordinance.
That's what I wanted to clarify. So that 93 count really isn't quite cohesive, or let's frankly just say it's not cohesive with the code.
As far as required parking, correct.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
All right, does anybody else have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you put that image we were just looking at back up on the screen? I'm wondering, help me understand, what is that little gap east of the building between the building and the landscape buffer? Yeah. How big
Corey?
is that and what is it?
Yeah, Corey, do you have the final, the one where the swale is back there? That's really, I'm sorry. Maybe I know you got that one, Corey.
While you're looking for it, my other question is there a landscape sliver that I see to the north of the building?
I'm 4 feet. My setback, when I built the building back in 1993, the setback, and Corey probably can confirm this, was 4 feet. So I built it up on the quote edge of the property, which is 4 feet off of it.
Yeah.
So yes, you're correct. It doesn't show landscaping, but there is 4 foot of landscaping on the north side of that building that runs the whole length of it. So I'm going to talk to my architect about that one. But yeah, this other question you had, that now is a retention swale that civil engineering has decided that that's where we're going to be putting this water that we're all talking about.
And then does the water stay there or does it get piped into the storm system?
No, you guys, with this 400 West, I was listening earlier in onto the conversation you had about the applicant before. I'm 800 West, so 400 West, I don't know where this is at, but he's 4 blocks east of me. And I've lived out here a long time. I got a house behind the place, another property. You put a shovel to this dirt, you dig down 2 foot, you're going to get water all the time for the last 30 years. In fact, I got a well pipe at my house in the back, and I can look down that 8-inch pipe, and there's water constantly 2-3 foot below grade.
In answer quick to that question, I believe our city engineer looked at this site under the new retention requirements, and it fell under, since it's an existing site, it fell under the threshold of retaining, and it will function as a detention.
Okay.
Great. That's good. So unless anybody else has any other questions, I don't see anybody else unmuting. That's what I'm looking for. Then we will thank you, Mr. Bell, for your comments. And this item is a final site plan, so it is not scheduled for a public hearing at all. So at this point, as a commission, if anybody else has any other questions for staff.
Chair Daly, can I just add one thing for you in the discussion?
You bet. Go ahead.
The applicant has indicated, can you accept the site plan without the additional internal parking? The answer to that is the commission could. You would just have to waive it under the parameters of waiver of strict compliance.
So Corey, did we already approved a waiver of strict compliance once upon a time?
Yes.
So technically we don't have to do anything again if we don't want to change that, but if we do want to kind of use that buffer toward internal parking, then we'd have to revisit that?
Yes. And add an additional waiver allowance.
Got it. Thanks, Corey. Okay. Yeah, there's probably a lot to talk about here. We got parking, we got landscaping, we got the site plan itself. I kind of think that it would be beneficial for us to, well, I don't know. You guys tell me, do we want to start with one of these and start with parking? Let's talk about parking and see how people feel about what we want to do with that and how many stalls are appropriate. Do we want to do it that way? Okay, great. Listen, I'll go. I've already kind of mentioned a couple of things before. I do feel strongly that any parking modification be tied to the use of the building, so that as the use changes, then that would come back to us to talk about and figure out what the best way to go is. Because certainly with vehicle repair, yeah, it's not the type of thing where you'd get a whole bunch of people to show up, park their cars, and go inside of a building. So a large building isn't, it's not like retail. Along those lines, then I am I do feel comfortable, honestly, to set the parking at, 35 based on the engineer's recommendation. And, I think that's a good starting point for that. So anybody else have any thoughts or comments on parking?
I'll just jump in real quick. Kevin, I mirror your thoughts generally. You can kind of see where I'm going to lean once we, in a month or two, talk about just parking requirements generally, because I kind of agree that they're a broad stroke of requirements, which is very hard to allocate to many different uses over an entire city's worth of use. But I like the idea and I support the idea that we tie any decision to specifically vehicle repair only. And then this differential between 44 stalls shown on the plan and then the shortfall of interior landscaping could be made up. You have essentially 9 stalls that could be used for landscape islands or whatnot. So I think there's some play there. In fact, we could almost say, well, if we want to err on the side of caution, let's anywhere between 35 and 40 and give up 4 stalls internally, and let's make some landscape islands where there would have been a parking stall otherwise. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to have a parking conversation. I've been trying to push this parking conversation for a while. You've heard me say that many times, because I think there's a need for parking, but I also don't like just unused asphalt in our city, and think that we need to be wise about our requirements and all that thing. That being said, I am, like Kevin, not comfortable just giving a parking modification unless it's tied specifically to the use. And even with that, I would probably focus on what the engineer said, but yet I still feel a little bit hesitant going all the way down. Like, that's just a huge drastic cut. So I would almost be like, okay, can we somehow stay on the high end of that, even though it's a parking modification? I don't know, but I could probably be convinced otherwise if there's a strong reason for not wanting the high end of the modification. So.
And that's why I'm thinking not 35, say 40, Becky. Just say, hey, let's give up 4 of the stalls for landscape so that he can meet that requirement. And then the focus on the parking lot modification, let's stick with 40 and not go down to 35. That at least that may be a compromise between the stalls. I'd be interested to see what Heidi and you have to say.
I like your idea of 40. I think the higher end, on my opinion, and then just give them for 4 stalls. I like that idea.
Heidi, do you think 4 would give them enough space to meet some of that landscape?
Maybe. It's hard to say because, like Corey said, they don't have any calculations showing exactly what they have provided. I think in the image we saw, they were counting that whole frontage towards their interior landscaping or potentially the back. Their image said they had 10%. I don't think they had 10%. I don't think they were properly calculating interior versus buffer versus frontage. I tend to lean that in general, we as the United States, let's say, has greatly overparked everything we do. So I tend to stick with what the engineer would require at 35% and lean more towards the more landscape you have, the more your building has value and the more, that's where I lean. And so if the historic data from our applicant is down in the 20s and our engineer recommends 35, I'm comfortable with 35. I think it's important they meet their interior landscape requirements. And so it's hard for us just to guess how many stalls equals the interior landscape requirement. And based on, just like Corey explained, it's going to depend on how many parking stalls you have. So kind of a tricky guessing game.
Yeah, and I guess along those lines, you know, if it's 35, chances are the rest of that space, I mean, it's more likely that that space gets used as interior landscaping to try and meet those requirements. And, you know, in the future, if something were to change, that space would probably still be there to be repurposed if we needed to. So anyway, I guess one of the things we can do, we don't have to decide on the 35 right now. We can kind of come back to that again if we want to as part of the motion, if we want to do that. But let's talk really quickly about, unless we want to keep talking about parking. I feel like we've hammered out parking. Great. Let's talk about landscaping, and essentially the idea of amending our previous waiver of strict compliance for landscaping. What's the appetite for the commission on doing that? For me, I'll be honest with you, you know, it feels like we've already made a pretty good compromise by going from 30-foot buffer down to a 15-foot buffer. And I feel like we're going to make another compromise instead of requiring, you know, 80 parking stalls or 44 parking stalls that's on the drawing. You know, maybe we'll go 40 or 35, and that can be used for landscaping. Me personally, I don't really have a lot of desire to readdress our waiver of strict compliance for landscaping, but I can be convinced otherwise. So. Anybody?
Again, I'm interested to see what Heidi has to say about.
Heidi, do you want to start? Because we're all looking at you.
Well, I would say, Kevin, if you're not too interested, are you saying you want it to go back to the 30 feet?
No, I'm saying we've already talked about it. We decided that we'd be comfortable going to 15. Let's just leave it at 15. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to go back to anything else. Let's leave it at 15.
Okay.
I'm going to say that I agree with Kevin. I wasn't involved in any of these previous conversations, but when you make a decision, I think you should stick with it. And so if you've already decided that you're okay with the 15, when I see landscape buffers shrink in width, I usually like to include a berm, but it sounds like this is the opposite of a berm, and it's going to be their area for detention. So if we're concerned about a landscape buffer, I was trying to picture this in my mind when the applicant was speaking, and he was talking about an 8-foot wall and a fence, and I can't picture this. I suppose I really should have done a site visit before tonight, but we could, if we're worried about the buffer and the use of what's behind it, you could always add the requirement that he has conifers or trees of some type and shrubs of some type to mitigate whatever the buffer can't do width-wise, because it's shorter. You can compensate that with plant material.
Yeah, I think in this case, a berm honestly doesn't make a lot of sense because of that 8-foot wall on the east, and it kind of goes down the east side and curves over to the south side. So it's already hidden behind an 8-foot wall. So, but those are some very good points. So Becky.
Well, and he did talk about having trees too. I don't know if it was this one or the last one. I'm trying to remember which application, but he did talk about including trees there as well. But the specific type of trees might be helpful to give some direction so that keeping our, like you, Kevin, we went through this whole process. We came up with the solution. There were X, Y, Z reasons why he requested this, and we felt comfortable with it. I don't love exceptions. Am I still here? Something just went weird.
Yeah, you cut out for back up about 15 seconds.
I don't love giving many exceptions or many changes. When we have our code, we've written in our code for a reason. And if the code is requiring us to make exceptions over and over and over again, and especially at in one application, to me, that signals some red flags of like, why are we requiring this exception and this other exception and this and this and this? But that being said, I think there's tools that we could use to still have the landscape work as a buffer might, a larger buffer might. And I also think that for me, kind of if you look, we got to look at it kind of from an overall project standpoint and say, okay, maybe we're giving and taking on this, but overall, like, it's hard to imagine, but is it all improving? Are these exceptions improving the project? Are they helping it to be an asset to the city, I guess? And so I think when it's an auto repair and there's already a fence, the buffer is less important in improving the project to me. I do think landscaping is important. I do think adequate parking, not over parking, but adequate parking is important. So if those two things are met in my mind, I'm fine with giving exceptions.
Yeah, so and to be clear, in the staff report, Corey has put in there what we approved for a waiver of strict compliance in the past, and that basically says that it's limited to a 30-foot landscaping buffer, that it means maintained along the south and east property of the boundaries adjacent to the residential zone, that it's requires 13 trees within that buffer, and the buffer will be 15 feet. So that's what we had previously approved, and I'm comfortable sticking with that. So,
do you think we should be more specific about the type of trees?
The type of trees? I think we could talk about that. Mackenzie's got something to say. One of our city arborists. Go ahead.
So the landscaping code, section 1251.070B3 says when a landscape buffer consists of a fence, the chat box, and this is difficult. If it consists of a solid wall, it should also, sorry, the chat box is not big enough. If an architectural buffer consists of solid fencing or a wall, evergreen landscaping anticipated to grow to more than 6 feet in height shall be provided at distances sufficient to provide a visual and noise-reducing barrier. Such landscaping shall consist of at least one tree for every 20 feet of fencing. So the code does narrow what kinds of trees can be considered the buffer trees.
Great. So Heidi, you had mentioned conifers, and I think that's kind of in line with what Mackenzie just read, isn't it?
Yep. I don't know. She also read some dimensionality there, and I don't know the dimension of how wide this applicant's lot is.
Well, so the buffer is 15 feet, provides 15 feet along the fence or away from the fence, and then the depth is, or the length of it is, I don't know that.
What did Mackenzie just read? That it was one tree every 20 feet?
Yep.
That's correct. 20 feet of linear distance of the barrier, not the width.
Right.
But we've set.
But you just said, Kevin said 13 trees.
Yeah. So in our waiver of strict compliance, the requirement we're listing, it says the zoning ordinance requirement 13 trees shall remain in effect, and the trees shall be depicted and installed as part of a final site plan approval. Oh, but Corey, or Mackenzie, one of the two, do you remember, does that apply to the whole site or just to the buffer?
I think it just applies to the buffer, because I think that would be what is required in the one tree per 20 feet.
Yeah, you're reading it correctly, Kevin. That's what was measured out on the conceptual. That's my delay. I was going back to the conceptual plan report.
Okay, so 13 trees within that buffer.
Yep.
Great.
I think then, according to what Mackenzie read, we should suggest or recommend that whatever number she said needs to be conifers, if all of them do, or if a portion, I can't remember.
Well, so then we can just leave it to be, the rest of it to be subject to the ordinance that she read. That'll be of a evergreen variety that'll grow at least 6 feet tall or something like that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. What else do we want to talk about that we haven't kind of mentioned already? Anybody else have anything else they would like to discuss? Great. I see a lot of shaking heads and feels like we've covered a lot of ground here. Then the chair will entertain a motion. Let's start with, we've got a couple of motions in the staff report, the parking modification first and the final site plan second. So I will entertain a motion for the parking modification if somebody feels so inclined. Or I can do it. I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the request for a parking modification for the proposed user located at 335 South Frontage Road, subject to the following. And I'm just going to be really clear here and say number one is the parking count for Dave's Complete Auto site shall be a minimum of 35 parking stalls. And then we'll leave 2, 3, and 4 as written in the staff report, and then to add number 5, and this is where we need our usual attorney chair to help with this type of stuff, but to have 5 be that this parking modification shall apply only as long as the use remains vehicle repair, unless there's a better way to say that, with reasons for actions A through E in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion about that parking modification motion?
So I'm just wanting to fill out, sounds like Heidi and maybe you, Kevin, are liking 35. I still am a little bit like wanting a little bit more, just because I feel like it's such a drastic change from what we have. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, like, I don't want to overpark, but for some reason I'm like trying to decide if 35 versus 40 is really gonna, I don't know. I'm trying to decide if I should like make this a thing or not. Christina, Spencer, what do you think?
Well, I like the specification of the usage. I agree with the auto parts. Not people aren't going to go in there, but I think I'm good with 30 or 40, 35 or 40.
Spencer, do you feel strongly one way or another?
I just keep on going back to like Google Maps, and I see how densely, I mean, even before the addition, he's got a lot of Google Maps and Google Earth Pro. There's just a lot of used stalls as it is right now. So I hate to shrink the requirement if he's adding another 8,500 square feet. So I still feel like he's going to use stalls in addition to hiring on a couple people and having the additional square footage. So my only modification, we have a proposal, as a motion as it stands, but I'm still feeling 40. I'll probably get outvoted, but.
So I was going to say, the way to deal with that, I guess, or to approach this is if you would like to make a motion to amend, you can do so, and we can talk about that motion to amend and put it all on the table.
Okay, and I'd make a motion to amend number 1 to a minimum of 40 stalls.
Great. Do we have a second to the motion to amend? Where did Becky go?
We lost her. We lost my second, but she's already
I'll second it.
Christina seconded it. So,
I'll
okay,
second it.
We can, that's good. Maybe we give a half a second for Becky to see if she
we need our 5th person.
Reconnects, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we need to talk more about, the pros and cons of the 35 versus 40, because we've already really discussed a lot of that already. I think this is just a good way to, make sure that we are definitive as a commission to decide what we're going to do. So, yeah, that's weird. Becky just disappeared right at the
I've had trouble with my internet. I've dropped 3 times already, so
Oh, yeah?
maybe she's having trouble.
That's weird. Okay.
He should be coming back.
Here she comes. Perfect. All right, Becky, hopefully you can hear us and you're connecting okay. We have a motion to amend as we're going to, Spencer's motion is to amend from 35 to 40 parking stalls. And it's been seconded. Do you have anything to say about that, or should we just move on and vote about it?
Sorry about that. I don't know why my computer just crashed, but we can just vote about it.
Great. Well, we were kind of just dithering for a minute, waiting for you to reconnect because we figured you were on your way right back. So anyway, all right, let's vote on this one and get this thing going underway. We'll start with Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
Commissioner Chagrud.
Chagrud.
I'm sorry. I'm totally.
Chagrud.
Chagrud. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just depending on how you want to say it. Good. Am I supposed to say aye or nay?
Yeah, so aye if you want it to be 40 and nay if you want to stick with 35.
Nay.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
And I'm a nay. So the motion to amend passes 3-2. So we'll go with 40. So back to the original motion as I made it with the amended number 1. You know what? We need to change reasons for action E and B. So we need to change reasons for actions B and E because they also reference 35 parking stalls. So let's do this the right way just to make sure that we get our I's dotted and our T's crossed. So I'll make a motion to amend reasons for actions B and yeah, go ahead.
Before you say that, I think the reason for action on B was just referencing the recommendation from the city engineer.
Oh, you're right.
Up to 35 stalls. And so I think only E needs to be changed.
Great. Good point. Thank you. So I'll make a motion that we amend reasons for action E to also reflect 40 parking stalls. Yes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Let's just go. All those in favor say aye.
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 Do we have anybody opposed? No. That's
just me, right?
Okay. We'll put down yes. Heidi is a nay. That's fine. Okay. Perfect. So back to the original motion as amended and amended again. Any other further discussion on the parking modification? Great. Let's vote on this one. We'll start with Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Chagrud.
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Perfect. Then on to the final site plan. Essentially, what we're saying with the final site plan is that we are going to kind of allow staff and the applicant to work out some of these details. And then if there are any irreconcilable differences, then it would come back to us. So I will entertain a motion for the final site plan.
I'll make a motion, Kevin.
Great.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan amendment for the proposed changes to site of the Dave's Complete Auto located at 335 South Frontage Road, subject to conditions 1 through 5, and with stated reasons for action A through D.
I'll second.
Commissioner Wilcox seconds it. Thank you very much. All right. Do we need to discuss this final site plan anymore? Or should we just vote on it? Great. Let's vote. Commissioner Summerhays, it's you.
Aye.
Commissioner Chagrud.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Perfect. So I believe that wraps us up for the for this item on the agenda, and we will invite Commissioner Hayman back so we can move along with our meeting and turn the chairmanship, I guess, or whatever, over to Chair Hayman. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. We don't have very much left on our agenda. So the next issue is just addressing the 2021 Planning Commission meeting schedule, which we're obligated to publish. I'll turn the time over to staff, I suppose.
Wait, when do we get to renominate Shaylin and Kevin?
Not until January.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna put in a strong pitch that we have really excellent commissioners that would make an excellent chair. Just saying. Does anybody have any concerns with the meeting schedule?
Maybe Mackenzie, do any of these not fall on the normal second and fourth Wednesday rotation?
No, this year nothing fell on a holiday, so these are all normal.
Okay. Sounds good.
To the best of my ability, I can say that.
Excellent. And our staff attorney, Lisa Romney, has suggested that this upcoming year that we have a training schedule where we take some time and go through the Utah Municipal Land Use (MLUDMA) code, which I think is an excellent idea. So anybody have any concerns with digging in and learning?
Wait, don't I get to give my pitch?
Oh, well, Lisa, the fact that you suggested it, I'm sure everybody is just going to say yes, but please give your pitch.
Yes, well, I just wanted to have an opportunity. I really, number one, welcome Commissioner Chagrud. It's nice to have you on board and your experience. This is a great group. And also, I just appreciate Commissioner Wilcox's introduction. I think it was great. And I love the tenets of lifelong learning. And my dad was a professor and my grandfather was a professor. And anyway, I mean, I've just learned from them that, yeah, continuing to learn is fun and exciting. And I really appreciate the job that I have because I get to learn something new every day and work with great people like you. And this commission has been very proactive, and I appreciate that, about wanting training and demanding training. And last year, or I guess this year, we sort of tackled some of the training that's provided by the Utah Luau, the Land Use Academy of Utah, and we watched some of their videos and things like that. And I was trying to think of a framework this year that would be nice. I guess I like to be organized and have a plan for how this training would go about and what order made sense. And the more I looked at the land use code, I thought, I think this is a really good framework. And I know it sounds really boring to just read through some statutes and codes, but I think that I kind of want to approach it as a bit of a book club, and hopefully you'll say, wow, yeah, I didn't know that was the definition of family, or I didn't know we had that, and I'm going to learn right along with you. I always, if there's a question in the code, I always say, well, let's look at the code, let's look at our ordinance, because we think we know it, but it's always helpful to reread with the facts that we have in front of us. And so I think it would be really helpful. I mean, on some of these, sure, you can skim through, but even the definitions, I think, hopefully are going to be fun. And we can talk about different topics. There's some statutes on vested rights, and there's some statutes on complete applications and things like that. So as I put in the report, there's 76 pages of pretty big font. It's not tiny font as I attach each of these chapters, but some weeks we may have more to talk about than others, and I just divided them up in this in the staff report what I think makes sense for the whole year, so that we have a year's worth, and we can either tackle this the first meeting of every month or the last meeting of every month. But I hope you're willing to take it on. And I kind of ran it by Corey and Chair Hayman, and so hopefully they, I'm sure they were just humoring me, and it might be too ambitious, but I think it'll be fun, and I hope you think so too. And like I said, we'll just kind of read through it. And I am kind of taking a page out of Mayor Deemer's book. I don't know if you remember Mayor Deemer a few mayors back, but when he started, he said to the council, we need to know what our code says. And so he required, I think it was the municipal code, but he said, we're going to read the entire municipal code. And every month we picked a different title of the municipal code. And sometimes we talked about it and sometimes we didn't. But by the end of the year, the council at least had an idea of what was in the code. So anyway, if you're willing to do it, I would be really excited and hope that we can tackle this really exciting, because it is interesting. You're like, wow, I didn't know it said that. So I like to go to the source too. And this is what we'll bring to you is you will be reading the source.
Lisa, I have a request, which is in connection with doing this training. I would very much like to experience vicariously some of your prior vacations, even if it's just one photo that you put up before we start discussing things for our new commissioners who may not be in on this particular issue. So Lisa has done training for us before and she's put together phenomenal PowerPoint presentations, but she likes to travel and go to really amazing places. And so she has been kind enough to share with us over the years some of the amazing places that she has visited. And I have to admit, I am feeling really like landlocked lately. So that would be.
I second that. I will second that motion, Shaylin.
Okay, we can do a recap of, for 2021, because I mean, I don't think we're going anywhere for a while. And yeah, I certainly haven't gone anywhere this year, but sure, we can do a recap.
Woo! Anything, anywhere that's not.
It makes it more interesting and we like it more.
Lisa, before you jump down, do we need to formally, Corey pointed out, do we need a motion to actually approve this meeting schedule? I mean, nobody had any objections to it, but I can do a formal motion if we need it.
Yeah, typically we do a motion.
Let's do it. I move that we approve the 2021 meeting schedule as set forth in the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Do I have anyone opposed? No. Thanks for keeping me on track, Corey.
Shaylin, just quickly on, I wholeheartedly support the notion that we do some training each month. What I would suggest is most times we're at least a couple hours or an hour and a half, or in some cases past midnight, hopefully not too often, but we almost have to kind of put a stopwatch to this saying, okay, we're going to chat about this, but no more than X number of minutes. And when we hit that minute, we say, hey, that's been a great discussion, and we move on.
I think that's a great idea. And in fact, we could, I mean, Lisa and our staff are always really good about when we've talked about trainings, if it looks like there's going to be a really heavy schedule, we just pull the training and wait to move it to another agenda. So I would anticipate that would happen, that if it looks like we're going to have a particularly full week, we'll just bump training to the next meeting. And if it turns out that we have, 2 agenda items and a training scheduled, and the 2 agenda items take us a long, long time, I don't have any problem tabling it until the next time too, because I'm very sensitive to all of your schedules and we don't want to make this onerous.
And I also don't mind that it's at the first of the meeting, because as the public joins our meeting and they're sticking around, if we do it at the very end, they never hear it. So from a public education, not only just for us, I don't think it's bad for them to hear, oh, they're reviewing LUDMA, they're reviewing code or whatever else we might be being educated on and trained on. It's good for the public to hear it too.
I think we can talk about that. We usually try to put the matters where we think that they're going to be the most participants up front so that they can come in and participate and leave if they'd like to, but we can certainly look at that. Yeah, I'm excited. And I like the way that you phrased it officially, Lisa. What say ye? I think that we all say yay.
Yay. And I also would say with what Spencer said, I wholeheartedly agree about putting a limit on it. I do also appreciate the times when we have really short meetings, but I think sometimes in those situations, maybe we do 2 trainings or something, like, I don't know. I don't know that we necessarily all have to create a meeting just to do training, like if we have nothing on the agenda necessarily, but if we have a light agenda, it could be nice to have a couple in our back pocket and say, oh, you know, maybe we'll do 2 today or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I think a 20-minute discussion is sort of the max that, you know, people have peak interest. And so that's sort of what I'm shooting for, is just to hit the highlights and talk about a couple things, give a few examples. And yes, certainly, if that's why I said, like with Mayor Deemer's experiment, I mean, sometimes the meetings were too long, and, you know, even at 10 o'clock, I'm not sure people want to talk about vested rights. So we could certainly manage the time. And, you know, I mean, even just reading it, having it on the agenda and knowing that you've read it is a win.
Whatever, Lisa, I imagine you and Shaylin are like, ooh, it's 10 o'clock, vested rights. Let's go for it, like all the time. And Mason, right?
You.
What I live for. In the spirit of being conscious of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and move on to the Community Development Director's report. So I'll turn the time back over to Corey.
There, I should unmute, right? Okay, you should see on your screen here, just to update, the Summerhill Lane PDO subdivision did pass council, so that was approved. Each year, we're required to review, the council is required to submit and review their moderate income housing plan, and they did that at their last meeting, and I attached that report. So if you have not seen the report, it's on your agenda, and you can read what was submitted to the state. We don't have another meeting for December. This is one of those months where you get to enjoy the end of the month, and so we will see you next year. And I just put down your interim parking requirements, and we've ordered some materials. We're researching some items, and we'll come back to the beginning of the year on that. So with
Corey,
that,
I just have a question about that, the council approval. Did they end up approving with changes to what we recommended, or what? How did that go?
the Summerhill Lane.
Yeah.
Yes, they changed it. A couple of factors. They reduced the lots from 60, what was it, 66 to 63? About 3 or 4 lots. So that caused some increase in some lot sizes. They also modified the setbacks and required 12 feet instead of the 10 feet being proposed. And then the big ticket item is there is now an access to the frontage road.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and one question. So did everybody receive an email today from Janice Dennison, our new recorder, about the open meetings training? Lisa, is that something, I know historically in the past, that's training that you've provided to us, and the email that I received indicates that I need to go online and watch a video and take a quiz or something and get a certificate back. Is that because we're focusing so much on the other training that this is just easier for us to do offline? Because I like your trainings.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think this is coming from the recorder's office. Last year, the city manager kind of wanted to take the open meetings training and obligation to the city recorder. I had been doing a lot of that. And so last year, Leah provided that to the council. So I had mentioned we have a new city recorder, and I had mentioned, you know, we can either do online training, or I'm happy to give the training, you know, let's talk about it in January. But I understand I wasn't on that email, but I am aware of it. And so anyway, you have had your training for 2020. So I was kind of hoping that you would take that in January. I know the request is to get it done by January 1st, but I was thinking about revising that and saying, you know, do it by January 31st so that we have the training once each calendar year, because I think we did it for the Planning Commission last January of 2020. So I would just say that you have till January 31st and to do it in January. And I think that I think the decision's been made that, yeah, this year, there's just so much going on that let's just, have everybody do it by, this online training. So I'm fine with that. And I'm also fine if you do that training and you feel like, hey, we'd still like to talk about some of the issues, I'm happy to give the live training as well.
Okay, well, for right now, given that, let's all wait to take it until after January. Let's do it sometime in January. And in fact, if staff will put on the agenda for our January 13th meeting, just a reminder that we need to do that in the event that we haven't, that I think would be a good reminder for all of us. Because knowing me, I'll probably wait until I get that reminder and then I'll go do it.
Yeah, I debated whether to, I thought, well, I guess we could just do it in December and then next December, but I really like the training in January because people are just so busy in December. And anyway, it's a nice way to start. Plus some years we have new elected officials. And so January picks up all of those new elected officials as well.
Great. And it looks like from the comments, some of the commissioners haven't received that email. I just assumed that it blasted out to everyone. So I'll contact the recorder and ask her to resend in January so everybody gets a copy.
I just forwarded it to him.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
Okay. Last item on the agenda is minutes review and acceptance for our October 28th meeting. So we'll do this in the ordinary course, going page by page. If you have any corrections, let me know, starting with page 1, page 2, page 3.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
one thing on page 3, really minor, line 18 toward the end, Commissioner Daly, my name is spelled without an I in it, so just kill the I and we're good to go.
Great, thanks for that catch. Anything else? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission minutes of the meeting from the meeting of October 28th, 2020.
As amended?
As amended.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All those in favor say aye.
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 Do I have anyone opposed?
Before we adjourn, can I ask a quick question? I don't know. So my computer totally just like cut me out and there was some glitches. I'm wondering, Heidi said hers is Utopia. Christina, do you have Utopia? You dropped off at one point too.
Yeah, I've dropped off 3 times. I have CenturyLink and I've never had this trouble before.
Okay, so you don't have Utopia?
No.
Okay. We've had some bad, I'm just wondering, since the city is invested in Utopia and we are part of this, I'm just interested to know how many people are having difficulty if they have Utopia. So anyway.
I've got Utopia and rarely have any problems with it.
This is the first week. I've had a week that Utopia came to our area and there was something going on, but this is the first week and it's been kind of spotty. So
it's funny how much we come to rely on technology, and as soon as it doesn't work right, you're like, ah. So
and we have like no patience. I have no patience.
Well, before we adjourn, I just want to say thank you all. It's been a very trying 2020. It's certainly not what we anticipated, I think, back in January of this year. So it's a privilege to work with all of you. We have a fantastic planning commission and staff is stellar. So we're really lucky as a city. I hope that everybody has a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, good time. We'll all pray that 2021 will not be like 2020. We can get back to normal or whatever the equivalent of normal is. So thank you all, very happy holidays, and I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.